Just waiting for confirmation from. Okay, we are good. We are live. Chair, you can start the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. It's 9:01 a.m. and I would just like to say we have regrets today from Mayor Jeanette Horner and Councillor June Porter, who are both away, and Jonathan Scott, who may be joining us from time to time. I don't see him at the moment, but he's in another meeting, so he will join us whenever he can. So I would also just like to pass on the events that are going to be happening all at the Tiffin Centre within the next little while. So every Thursday there is the full day nature program, and on Tuesdays there's a half day program. There's going to be once again the March break camp at the Tiffin Centre, which is always a huge success. And the Spring Tonic Maple Syrup Festival will be happening in the beginning of April. So, if you have an opportunity to join, please do so. I would like to at this time also welcome Kevin Isis from Innisfil, who was not able to join us at our last meeting. Sorry? Okay, so thanks for joining us today, Kevin, and welcome to our board. So I would like to move on to the land acknowledgement. It has been a tradition of this board to call on various members to share this land acknowledgement. And so I have asked Councillor Ralph Mantelo from the town of Mono to read the land acknowledgement today. So I will turn it over to you, Councillor Mantelo.
Thank you, Chair. The Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority Board acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, the Saulteaux, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Algonquin, and they spoke several languages, including the Anishinaabe-Moan and the Potawatomi. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture, and we are committed to moving forth in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people.
Thank you very much. So we will now, if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflicts of interest, you may declare them now or at any time throughout the meeting. So we have a motion to adopt the agenda. When we're online, we have pre-assigned these motions. So if anyone does not wish to have their name as the mover or seconder, please let us know. But we have it moved by Mayor Scott Anderson, seconded by Councillor Gary Harvey. Resolved that the agenda for the Board of Directors meeting number 0223 BOD dated February the 24th, 2023 be approved.
Through the chair, before you move any further, just to let you know that Councillor Gary Harvey is not in attendance yet.
Oh,
so
okay.
We find another seconder. We can get a volunteer.
Kyle Fagan has volunteered, so thank you very much. And you can use your onboard to vote if you wish. If you have problems, then just signal with your hand, and we'll have a little bit of onboard training in the agenda. So if everybody could vote, that would be great. Thank you.
And it looks like people are understanding how to do it.
Excellent.
Just give me a second here. We're not quite a quorum for it to have passed here. Okay, yep. So we have 7 votes that have come in. That does mean that it has carried based on the number of members here. I do see a hand from Councillor Isis.
Councillor Isis. We have to unmute.
Yep. Sorry, Madam Chair, I was just voting. I haven't been able to get my onboard up yet. So
okay, super. Thank you so much. So we are good to go. Move on. Thank you. That motion is passed then. I don't believe there are any announcements today unless some members of the board have something they wish to share. So the next item is presentations. And our first presentation is going to be given by Director Flanagan regarding the onboard program and how to use it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So Cheryl, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to the board. Welcome to your first virtual meeting. Staff are really pleased to have this software. Staff, just before COVID had started looking into an online solution that would allow for us to be more efficient in both just the creation of our agendas, but also just for minute taking and for the board members, et cetera. And we started using a different program based on budget. And then Onboard actually came to Conservation Ontario and said, you know, if a certain number of conservation authorities sign up, we can give you a discount. And it actually came in half the price of what we were paying before, and we weren't paying that much. So we're really excited to use this. We've found it over the last 2.5 years to be extremely efficient for us. So when you log in, you'll have one of two views. You'll either have it looking like this, or you'll have it looking like this. Just pushing those 3 lines at the top will change the view for you. When you first log in, you're logged in onto the dashboard. Our dashboard, we just have our vision, mission, and values on there, and the announcements we may have for the board. We also have the upcoming meetings. So you'd see today's meeting there. And then the supplementary materials, which currently contains our administrative bylaws. So everything you need is right here on this first page when you log in for anything. You can also go in by calendar and it'll show you previous meetings. Now you won't be able to see meetings that you weren't invited to. This is because I'm an admin person, I can see all of them, but it would show you previous meetings if you wanted to go in and look at agendas for those. The actions button is really, this is the voting section. This is where all the lists of the votes are there. We do ask that when the votes become available, and they usually become available the day or two before the board meeting, please don't go in and vote until the actual board meeting, because you can't erase your vote. You can change your vote up until the day, but especially when it's like a recorded vote or anything like that, we really need to make sure that everything's accurate. So we ask you to not vote in advance of the meeting, especially too if for some reason you're not able to attend. We can't count your vote, but it still shows on the software. Now, this isn't where you will actually go in and vote most times, but you can see them there. I'll show you how to do that easiest before. This is notifications. This is if there's any notifications for you. They're mostly not any. Resources. This is where we have our administrative bylaw that you can find. That's also on the dashboard. And then onboard help files. They have some great help files for you if you do have any questions. We also have the directory, and this gives you a list of all of our board members along with your email addresses, and then information for the senior management team, as well as Carrie, our administrative assistant. Tasks is primarily only used by our chair. This is how she signs our resolutions. Once they've been passed, we'll send them to her and she has to go in and digitally sign them. Settings, this is where you can go in and you can make setting changes if you wish to. So for example, when you first log in, if you don't want to see the dashboard, you want to see the calendar, you can go there. And then there's the help section. So that's just a brief overview of kind of onboard's side. Also, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't see everybody. So if you have a question, Chair, if you're able to see everybody, let me know, that would be great. So now I'm going to show you quickly just how to.
Oh, sorry, I was waving. Maybe you couldn't see me. I had a couple questions about that section.
Mhm.
So on an Apple iPad, everything is working as you indicated. However, on the Apple 13 phone, instead of the lines at the top, there's 3 dots at the bottom. And if you press on those, it takes you into your sidebar that you have there, but you have to hit home to get back out of it.
Okay.
And then in my case, I have a red dot there and I have a red dot on actions. And when I pull that up, it appears there's a lot of actions that predate me being on the board, or going by the dates. So they have all these outstanding approvals. So I don't know what to get rid of them. Do I have to hit approval or what do I do?
I will have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay, because there's 14.
Carrie and I will look into it.
There's 14 of them, I believe. So,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just make a note of the actions form. We'll look at it after. Okay, so in an actual meeting, hopefully we'll get the problem fixed for the next meeting. And when you log in, you just have to click the Zoom button and Zoom will automatically start for you. Like mentioned, we had some technical difficulties. It looks like there's been some changes within onboard for the views, so we'll have to look into that. But that's the easiest way to join Zoom. If you want to look at the agenda, you literally just click anywhere on there and it's going to show up with the agenda for you. And you just look through the agenda. The attachments are down with them as well. So if there's any attachments you want to look at, and you just click on it and it'll open it up for you. View approval. This is where you actually go to vote. So if I go back up here to the motion to adopt the agenda, if you go to view approval, now I don't have the ability to vote because I was not given that ability. But as an admin person, I can go in and I can see the yeses, the nos, if somebody abstained, and then who hasn't voted. And in this case, you'll see that there were 10 people that haven't voted. And some of that is because some people aren't here because we do assign it to all 18 board members. So what I'm looking for is to make sure that based on the number of board members that we have at the table, the number of votes are at least 50% of that. And then also what's nice about this is if it is a recorded vote, we can actually go through and see who's voted and how. So that allows us to do a very easy recorded vote without having to go through the process of calling out everybody's name individually. We do send out calendar invites through Outlook, but if you wanted to create your own, you can do it right there. And you can also set up a send reminder. You can also join the Zoom again through here if you wanted to click it in here. Some of your view may be a little different than what I see because I am an admin person, but that is the general version of onboard. It's pretty user intuitive, but if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to Carrie or myself and we'll happily work you through it. So before I end this, I'll just reach out one more time and ask if there are any questions.
Any further questions? You know, we can't see you all on the screen when the share screen is up. So please, you know, just indicate or call out or, you know, let us know somehow that you have a question. Seeing none, I would like to thank you, Director Flanagan, for the presentation. And we do have a proposed resolution that the Board of Directors receive the presentation on the online software onboard as presented. And that we have assigned Deputy Mayor Paul Van Staveren and Councillor Christopher Baines as a seconder. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, I would call for the vote. Once again, if you can use your on board, that would be great. Councillor Isis, do you have a thank you.
And through the chair, that motion has carried.
Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is the board orientation. So this is to give members of the board, mostly new members, an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the NVCA. So I am going to call on our CAO, Doug Hebner, to share his presentation with us. Thank you, Doug.
Hey, thank you very much, Gail. I'm going to be doing this presentation along with the directors. We'll take you across the watershed, through the watershed, tell you a little bit about what it is the NVCA does.
We think, have we lost?
I'm just looking right now, Chair. Yes, it looks like we did lose him.
Sorry, technical difficulties once again.
Just give me a minute to see if he's able to get back in. Okay, so I just heard from Doug, his computer just crashed.
Of course.
Give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second here. I'm gonna. I've just asked him if he wants me to get started, and he can take over when he gets back on. I'm just waiting for his response.
That would be great, Cheryl, if you could do that.
Okay. Okay, so yes, it appears that his internet cable was just cut by a gentleman digging from Bell. So I will get us started here, but I will ask Chris or Byron to please step in at any point if you feel like I am missing something that Doug may have wanted to say. Again, through the chair, welcome to the NVCA board. We're pleased to have you in our 2023 to 2026 board. This is a 4-year term membership. This presentation, just to warn you, is going to be a little bit longer than my on-board one. We're all going to speak in tandem with the senior management team, and you're going to learn a little bit about kind of conservation authorities as a whole, the NVCA, what we do, the different departments we do, as well as some governance related items for you. So to get started, we want to talk about what is a watershed. Because conservation authorities are created based on watersheds, not municipal borders. So a watershed is an area of land that kind of catches all sorts of drainage, rain, snow, and it's drains or seeps into different marshes, streams, rivers, lakes, groundwaters, etc. There's also things like homes, farms, cottages, small towns, big cities. All of those things can help make a watershed. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and can vary by many, many acres of land. The NVCA, for example, is 3,700 square kilometers. And the water all kind of drains into a shared kind of area. So this is a map that shows the 36 conservation areas and where the Nottawasaga Valley kind of lands within them. They go all across southern and eastern Ontario, and then there's one up in northern Ontario as well. The NVCA was created on May 5th, 1960 through an order in council. Now, at the time, there were much smaller amount of municipalities, but now there are 18 municipalities represented in our watershed. And we go from the north up at the Georgian Bay shoreline of Collingwood and Wasaga Beach, down to just a little piece of Collingwood, Essa, New Tecumseth, down into Bradford, West Gwillimbury. On the west, we have the Grey Highlands, Melanchthon, Shelburne, Amaranth, and then to the east, we have Oro-Medonte, Innisfil, Barrie. So you can see there, that's a full picture of our watershed. We are generally shaped like a bowl with a spout at one end. So that's kind of how you can see all of the different stuff that we're doing. So now I'm actually going to switch this over and I'm going to let Byron take over, and he's going to do the next few slides.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good morning, everybody. We are going to, yes, do a little bit of a tour of all different sides of this big bowl that Cheryl talked about. And so now we're on the, we're looking at the Oro Moraine. So we're on the east side of our watershed. And obviously Oro Moraine is a significant landform. And it protects considerable natural habitat, biodiversity, and considerable species at risk. It also provides source water for major watersheds, including Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay, and Severn Sound. Like any other moraine, this landform essentially captures rainwater and provides natural filtering for drinking water to thousands of residents. So obviously in need of protection or continued protection. Next slide, Cheryl. And oh, there we go. So now we've come up to the south end of our watershed, let's call it the top end. So Highway 9, thinking of the corridor from Bradford to Orangeville, if you will. And so this is the Oro Ridge Moraine territory, and basically it's the headwaters for most major rivers in central Ontario. Part of Ontario's green belt, and its natural watering system provides drinking water to over 250,000 people. So again, another significant landform in need of protection. This entire moraine beyond our watershed actually covers an area of 1,900 square kilometers, runs essentially from Rice Lake to the Niagara Escarpment. We do have property on the Oak Ridges Moraine, which is known as Tottenham Conservation Area, which is leased to town of New Tecumseh. All right, Cheryl, next slide, please. And we're going to go to the west side of our watershed. So now we're in Niagara Escarpment country, and I'm sure everybody knows about the Niagara Escarpment or where it is. It stretches from the Niagara area to Tobermory. It is a World Biosphere Reserve and contains the oldest forest ecosystem and trees in eastern North America. The Bruce Trail, great hiking trail, runs through the Niagara Escarpment with over 900 kilometers of trails and 450 kilometers of side trails. We own and manage over 80 hectares of land within the Niagara Escarpment, and all those lands provide obviously recreational opportunities for thousands of residents and beyond every year. those lands, they all fall within 4 municipalities: Town of Mono, Mulmer, Clearview, and Town of the Blue Mountains. Next slide, Cheryl. The middle of our watershed contains a well-known and internationally significant wetland known as Menacing Wetlands. It falls within Springwater Township and Clearview Township. Over 6,000 hectares or 15,000 acres in size. This wetland is another bowl within a big bowl, and it's essentially a collect-all for most of the water within our watershed. So all the water except for the rivers and creeks that are in the Collingwood area. So Menacing is a natural flood control system, one of the best known and active flood control systems out there within Ontario. And obviously our downstream communities depend on this system to, do its thing during the flood season, spring freshets or whatever, and collects the water and it slowly releases it so that we don't have this big strong surge down at the lower end, namely Wasaga Beach. Menacing is obviously habitat for many endangered species, and it provides recreation for thousands and thousands of visitors every year. It is one of 37 Ramsar sites in Canada and one of 2,400 in the world. It's one of our more popular properties, and it's obviously become a 4-season destination for many, many visitors. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So our lower end, Town Wasaga Beach, and it includes Springwater Township as well, but namely Town Wasaga Beach, that's the northern edge of our watershed. And it, again, receives most of the waters from the rivers and tributaries that flow downwards through our watershed. We've undertaken countless water improvement projects over the year, and they are all a good contributor to the water quality experience at Wasaga Beach each year. And good water quality is essential to their well-being. 15 years ago, Town of Wasaga Beach received blue flag status, and criteria for blue flag status includes there's 27 criteria. I'll hit a couple of them, just being water quality, environmental management, environmental education, and safety and services. Wasaga Beach sees over 1.5 million visitors to the beach each year, making this blue flag status imperative. So it's a good connection with the work we do upstream to what's going on downstream. And next slide, please, Cheryl. These are shots of the Nottawasaga River. The one top left is actually through Menacing Wetlands. Top right is those beautiful sand dunes that you see coming into the town of Wasaga Beach. Really something to see if you haven't seen it. And the bottom slide is getting closer to Wasaga Beach too, just before a small set of rapids. Nottawasaga River has been referred to as the lifeblood of our watershed. It essentially runs from the south end, the top end, right down to the bottom end, and it outlets mouth of the Nottawasaga River right into Georgian Bay, Lake Huron. 120 kilometers in length from top to bottom, known for its recreational, cultural, and environmental features. This river sees tens of thousands of visitors, probably more, every year. It's known as one of the biggest and best steelhead rivers, that's fish, on Georgian Bay, and that certainly brings serious economic benefit to the entire region. Salmon, trout, bass, pickerel, sturgeon are just some of the 50 different species of fish that you're going to find in this river. Recreational fishing in our watershed is a multi-million-dollar industry, and the protection and goodwill of this river is definitely important, and it's number one on our agenda. Obviously, it's a canoe stream. This river, you can float down this river and experience sites that one would have seen a couple hundred years ago during the War of 1812 era, from Edenville down to Wasaga Beach. It's still pretty natural, and it's really worth the trip. And obviously, For those looking for flora and fauna, the birds, etc. It's the entire river is very sought after for people to canoe, etc. For the past 30 years, we have led on river restorations on this river and its tributaries, and we know that has obviously contributed to the betterment of this entire system. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So here we have just a few of the natural beings that you'll find within our watershed. We're home to many species of flora and fauna, a very rich natural world, and it's become appreciated by many from afar. And but we also have a growing list of concerns with regards to vulnerabilities of some of these species. Some of them are definitely under stress. We have a number of turtle species within the watershed, and all but one of them is endangered, threatened, or of special concern. So obviously we take that very seriously. We have several bird species within our watershed: meadowlark, bobolinks, wood thrushes, chimney swifts. They are all species at risk, and a lot of the work that we do contributes to the betterment of those species. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, but we try to do our part. Even down to insects. There is a rusty patch bumblebee that is endangered in our watershed. We've had PhD candidates, etc., from various universities doing various studies on our properties over the years, and the recent one was on the rusty patch bumblebee. The Hines emerald dragonfly is found within our watershed, namely Fort Willow area, Springwater Township. It's a globally rare species, but it's found in our watershed and not many other places. Lake sturgeon, northern brook lamprey, they're on the species at risk list, and of course our stewardship team does considerable works to obviously benefit that species. Our watershed protection goes a long way to assisting with the plight of these species, obviously. I think that's it for me on this end. Looks like Doug or Cheryl is going to be up.
Well, Doug is actually driving to the office, but he won't be here probably for about an hour. The next section is Doug's, but Chris has generously offered to do this section. So I'm going to introduce Chris Hibbard, who is our Director of Watershed Management Services.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is a sort of a key point in the presentation in terms of the background and why do we have conservation authorities? How are they formed? Next slide. A lot of discussions are on the formation of conservation authorities date back to the 1930s, 1940s. Also at that time, we had extensive deforestation, we had drought conditions, and it resulted in an unhealthy state for, poor land in terms of loss of soils, water quality, and also issues of forest practices. So groups like agriculturalists, naturalists, sports groups started having discussions about how can we manage this? How can we manage this on a watershed basis? The other component, the next slide, was flooding and an issue. And 1954 with Hurricane Hazel was a huge watershed moment, excuse the pun, in Conservation Authority's history. And so before 1954, just to note that the Conservation Authorities Act actually came into and was formed in 1946 after those discussions between those groups, allowing municipalities to form a conservation authority to help with the management of natural resources on a watershed basis. And then in 1954, with these sort of conditions that occurred in the city of Toronto and across portions of Southern Ontario, there became renewed interest in the Conservation Authority model. Next up. This is a picture of Tottenham Dam during Hurricane Hazel. And across Southern Ontario, 4,000 families were left homeless and 81 people lost their lives as a result of flooding. And that storm, I guess in today's dollars, would have been close to $1 billion. Next slide. I believe this is a picture in Mono Township of a lost bridge as a result of Hurricane Hazel. It hit the south part of our watershed much worse than the other parts. Conservation authorities learned two simple but important lessons from the Hurricane Hazel that helped our Shaper flood programs today. One, we need good warning system. Two, we need to avoid building in floodplains. And those were the key things. How do we let people know what's occurring, but how do we be proactive and direct development outside the floodplain? The government amended the Conservation Authority Act, allow conservation authorities to regulate land for safety of the community and to acquire lands for recreation and conservation purposes. And whether it be New Lowell, whether it be Tottenham, whether it be Utopia, there's a variety of different properties that we now purchase our own. Next slide. NVCA formed in 1960, and as part of that, some key reports that were produced by the province after our creation, including NVCA conservation report, both in 64 and 73, in terms of guiding, providing direction. I guess they would call them the early version of our integrated watershed management plan, and then provided that overview or direction for the Conservation Authority moving forward. Next slide. The 1964 report is a picture out of it, and it just showed current conditions and opportunities that we needed to look at and enhance, whether it be riparian planting, tree planting, best management practices to prevent erosion and also reduce the flooding situations as well. Next slide. The 73 report was a sort of follow-up in terms of where do we what's happened since 64, what are the current issues, and some very similar, still work to be done. And many of the programs you see now, their genesis came out of some of these reports saying here's some of the issues that we're having in our watershed and how do we move forward. So whether it be healthy waters, it would be our stewardship program or planning program, and also the regulation program as well. Next slide. So Cheryl talked very early on about watershed. We are, in a sense, sometimes seen as an envy in Ontario. I think BC is looking at the Conservation Authority model to maybe use that out and their area, that part of the province that's suffered flooding, especially from the flood forecasting and the management component. So we created on 3 fundamental principles: watershed-based jurisdiction, local decision-making, being yourselves, the board, and funding partnerships, which as Cheryl will note when she's going through the budget as well. Next slide. So I touched on it a little bit, but here's some of the key conservation timelines in Ontario. So early 30s, conservation movement began with the creation of the Federation of Ontario Naturalists. 1941, key conference, the Guelph Conference, brought conservationists together. 1944, the Ontario government established a conservation branch. And in 1946, the actual Conservation Authorities Act was originally approved. In 1960, NVCA was established. Next slide. And I'll put this back to Cheryl.
Okay, so the next section is we're going to just go into a little bit more detail of what each department and the teams within those departments and what they do. So to start, this is actually our most recent picture of all of our staff. This was taken at, what was it, a potluck, I think we had. So this is a great picture of many members of our team. We are a dedicated bunch. One of the things that I always say, I came from the private sector, having never worked in the public sector, and the passion and the dedication that public sector employees within the conservation authorities have is something unheard of in the private sector. And it's been really kind of refreshing to see that as well. This is just a quick little breakdown of how municipal levy is broken down by departments. This is based on the 2023 draft budget numbers. So you can see that there are some departments that receive very little and other departments where, the vast majority of levy does go. Corporate services and governance, kind of as the overhead departments, is the one that bears the majority of the levy cost, or at 44%. I shouldn't say majority, it's 44%. And then the rest of the departments follow suit, down to education, which has a whopping 0.3% of the levy contribution. So the next is we're gonna actually get into each individual departments. So I'm up first, which I guess is good because I'm speaking already. My portfolio contains corporate services and governance. And we play a critical and very supportive role to both the board of directors as well as the organization as a whole. So to start with governance, this is the picture of our previous board. Be prepared. We will be getting a picture of all of you in the very near future. So come dressed nice on the day we tell you. It'll be before one of our board meetings. So as previously mentioned, our governance model is made up of our 18-member municipalities as per the Conservation Authorities Act. Each municipality appoints one representative to sit on the board of directors. The Conservation Authorities Act has a big model of how conservation authority boards are to be created. However, back in the 80s and 90s, it got to be that many boards were becoming quite large because it has to do with the number of residents within your watershed, how many members you could sit on a board. And at one point, the NVCA had 27 board members for 36 full-time staff. And it was becoming very challenging. And so we, at the direction actually of the ministry, they'd asked all of the CAs to look at ways to become more efficient. We signed with all 18 municipalities an agreement that we would go with the one rep per municipality so that we had an 18-member board. Corporate services provides administrative support to the board through our agendas, meetings, minutes, the organization, your per diem payments, mileage payments, etc. By the way, if you have not submitted your payroll documentation, please send it to Carrie or myself ASAP. We need to get all of that entered into our system. We need a void check, the 2 TD1 forms, and the information form, please. So I've kept my slide deck pretty short. This is, in fact, my only slide related to actually corporate services. Corporate services has a very large breadth of a portfolio, I should say. We have not just governance, but we're also responsible for things like finance, making sure we're following the public sector accounting board rules, getting the budget done, doing our internal bookkeeping, purchase orders, our accounting software, making sure that we're ready and have a clean audit. Our audit, for example, starts next week, and it'll be presented to the board at the April meeting for our 2022 year. We also deal with asset management, payroll. We monitor all of the grant expenditures because our team is fantastic at getting lots of grants. We also do human resource functions. So we have the recruitment, retention, compensation, training, development, health, safety, wellness, employee record keeping, performance reviews. We're responsible for ensuring the corporate culture, customer service strategy, policies. And then we also have IT, which is our servers, our security, our software, computers. We also have information management. So having our databases and applications developed. So we have applications that our team has created for our planning department, for our education department, for our asset management section, flood management, and making sure that all of our data is centralized and available to staff as it's needed. They also make sure that we are preparing online forms and, getting into times where allowing online payments. And then we also have the GIS section, which deals with flood and erosion hazard identification, terrain modeling, data analysis, cartography, technology through GIS web applications, etc. So corporate services as a whole, we're in the background a lot, but we do a very important supportive role for all departments and yourselves as a board. So next, we're going to go into planning and regulations, and I'm going to invite Chris back to the table.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'll start off talking about planning regs. We're actually going to talk about the entire watershed management services program, but we'll start off with planning and regs. The planning regs services is basically has three components: plan, review, and input. That's where we're providing comments to our municipal partners when an application is circulated under the Planning Act. It could be to MNRF under aggregate resources, again to municipalities under environmental assessment, NEC applications. When we're doing that, we have in-house expertise in engineering and planning, ecologists, biologists that we were able to provide expert and scientific advice to the decision makers so they can make informed decisions on the applications that they have in place. The strategic plan component that we do is something like development of the integrated watershed management plan, where we worked with our stakeholders to identify what are the current issues within the watershed in terms of our features, other issues like that, and what does our stakeholders see as issues, and not only what are the issues, but what do the stakeholders see as solutions. So it's a very engaged and worthwhile process that we went through and hearing from our stakeholders. The other component is our regulatory component, the review and issuance of permits, and of course the enforcement that goes with that. Our focus on the planning and permitting is certainly based on Bill 23, very much focused on our mandatory matters, which includes natural hazards, source water, and that will include also the review of wetlands and stormwater management plans, but insofar that they're integral component to the natural hazard management. Next slide. I mentioned wetlands. They're extremely important in terms of the management of, in terms of water quality, in terms of the health of our watershed, but also extremely important when it comes to natural hazard management. They provide tremendous ability to store water and release it slowly, basically like a sponge, lack of a better term. And we have, as I mentioned, professionals in terms of ecology and biology when reviewing applications or providing advice to our residents, or when we're engaged in doing strategic planning type documents. I think there's pictures of, I'm looking here, somebody said Berry Eco Park and Collingwood Great Lakes Coastal Wetlands, one of the pictures there, Heather, the Heather pathway. Next slide. One of the key components that I mentioned as part of the planning is stormwater management planning. This is a picture of the Beaton area, one of the subdivisions that's been built out. You can see there's where the gradings occurred, but also the creation of storm pond. We're involved in that and more on the larger scale development in terms of, because the management of stormwater, certainly water quality is important, but our main focus will also be on the impacts to, or preventing impacts to natural hazards. Next slide. So this is off our interactive mapping on our website, and it shows, I believe that's in Midhurst. It shows the Willow Creek. It shows the extent of the regulated area. That'd be the red line, and everything within the red line is the area that's regulated pursuant to the Conservation Authorities Act and the regulation that goes with that. So areas of development that are within that would trigger a permit or a permission needed from the Conservation Authority. And what we're looking at is, when I say natural hazards, we're talking about things like flooding, erosion, which could include stream erosion or steep slopes, wetlands, unstable soils that can be organic or clays, or can be karst when you get into the NEC area, and also coastal areas as well. So dynamic beach, that's a good example for Wasaga Beach, where you have sandy material that can move around, or the flooding associated with the Georgian Bay. Those are the key things. So why are we doing that? Key thing is to prevent public safety, prevent loss of life. Direct development outside those hazards, or where the development has to go in within those areas, make sure it's being protected from those hazards. Reduce the risk to property infrastructure, minimize restoration costs, or in some cases, the costs associated with an event. One example would be in 2017, we had a major storm in the south end of our watershed. People were being evacuated from their home, but there was also federal and provincial assistance afterwards to help them repair and move forward. So one of the key things is if by reducing the developments in the floodplain, you reduce those potential future costs to our society as well. And the other component is protection of some natural features in terms of the wetlands, the water courses, and the shorelines. Those are a key thing that we're regulating for. Next slide. One of our key groups, and I mentioned we had engineers and professional engineers on staff. We do they look and work with planning and our regulation staff to do that, protect the people, property from potential risk posed by flooding, erosion, and other natural hazards. Our engineering staff are responsible for natural hazard management, flood and erosion control, ice management, flood forecasting and warning, in terms of monitoring our weather, monitoring our gauges, putting up messaging. Drought and low water is also a component that we'll be monitoring too. And stormwater management review is a key component of what our engineers are doing. Next slide. As part of the flood management component, we do have, and I mentioned this earlier on in one of the earlier slides, we do have own and operate a number of different water control structures. Pretty River Dike System, for example, Tottenham Dam, New Lowell, Utopia, and the Black Ash Creek channelization. Pretty River and Black Ash Creek are in Calling, Tottenham is in New Tecumseh, and New Lowell is in Clearview. Utopia is in ESSA, just for that purpose. Next slide. So as I mentioned, engineering will also put up flood messaging in accordance with provincial standards. We also meet with the greater GTA flood group, which is many different CAs, and sort of discuss consistency. How do we move forward with messaging, the procedures and processes that way. So that's not only with our engineers, we also do that with our biologists and ecologists, our planners, and other disciplines, and where we meet with adjacent conservation authorities, but also through Conservation Ontario. But CAs provide a planning support and advice to municipalities to minimize flood impacts and issue warnings. Staff monitor watershed conditions and forecasts on a daily basis, and to assist both our residents and our municipal partners who have to respond to these conditions. Next slide. Our engineering group will also review matters for erosion and to ensure that, whether it's stream erosion or slope erosion, where is the extent of that hazard? Where is the development being proposed? Looking to locate it outside that they're not subject to this future erosion or slope failures. Next slide. Another key component in our watershed management group is the low water. I mentioned that. I think this is a picture. I think I'm going to go back. I don't know if I should name names. Where I think it's Innisfil Creek a few years ago, where we had such a great drought condition. As you can see, we ended up with small pockets of water, but not contiguous flow all along. So it provides an impact not only to the habitat that's in the stream, but also the users, agricultural users along there. We do have a committee that we have within the watershed that includes various stakeholders, and we certainly meet on a yearly basis to touch base with this group. But we, along with the Ministry of Natural Resources, when there's conditions, there's various levels you can do, 1, 2, and 3. And that depending with, I think 3 is the worst, going with 1 at the beginning. Next slide. one of the key components in doing whether it's flood forecasting or determining, the health of our water is the monitoring component. And first of all, this is the snow survey. This is more related to the flood forecasting, where we're out and on I think twice a month measuring snow depth and weight within our watershed to then make a calculation if this is to melt, how much water would this produce. This helps us engage if we are having say a spring freshet or a quick melt, how much not only precipitation that we might receive in terms of rain, but if the snow is to melt, how would that contribute to our water courses, and what sort of impact would that have in terms of flood conditions. We're also looking at measuring base flow and determine those sort of stream flow conditions in non-flood conditions as well. Next slide. So one key component is our and I talked a little bit about the watershed, the monitoring, but the monitoring program itself, outside of engineering, does surface and groundwater, drinking and source water protection, and watershed report cards. We're actually due to produce another set. Usually every 5 years, we're updating our health checks. Basically, it talks about our entire watershed, but also goes through sub-watershed at a time to look at what are the trends, what has changed, what's our current condition. And it's very useful information for our residents and our municipal partners. And if anybody wants to see the current ones, we're happy to share those links and show you where they are. Next slide. So the groundwater monitoring, NVCA currently operates 19 monitoring wells as part of the provincial groundwater monitoring network at 10 sites within the watershed. The groundwater monitoring allows us to track changes in groundwater quality and quantity over time and identify potential contaminant sources and effective remediation strategies. Top photos on Ontario Geological Survey sampling, bottom photo is provincial groundwater monitoring network sampling sites. Next slide. Our monitoring program has been assessing stream health since 1996. The program includes a number of activities related to collection, storage, analysis, and reporting of data related to watershed health. And we do benthic invertebrate, basically looking at bugs samples and then identifying them under a microscope. The reason we do that is that many of these bugs will show the health of what that stream is based on what the bugs that we find. And how many. We also do water temperature sampling, stormwater sampling, electrofishing, and base flow measurements, as I mentioned before. We do have, I think it's 18 sites where we do surface water for the provincial ground surface water monitoring network. Next slide. Other monitoring programs we do on our property would include forest bird monitoring annually, and we've done that continuously since 2005, consisting of I think 5 locations in Tiffin, but we also do some monitoring in Minnesota just to see trends and see what's changed over the years and what's the health of our forests and what's the health of the bird population that we see. Next slide. So a key component in it, and it's something that we've been doing since the Clean Water Act came into play, is we're doing source water protection. Basically, this is the protection of drinking water, municipal drinking water, in terms of beginning considerable amount of studies to identify where those drinking water sources are, where wellhead protection areas could be in shoreline intake. How do we make sure, and in light of Walkerton and the report on Walkerton, how do we make sure that our drinking water, municipal drinking water sites are safe? We do that through we're the local watershed management organization, and we act as a source protection authority. We're also, along with the Severn Sound Environmental Association and like Simcoe, partnered there in terms of broader group. And we also do risk management official work for many of our municipalities. Next slide. I'll turn this over to Byron.
Thank you, Chris. So lands and operations. Well, let's start with the operations end of it. It's essentially all of the infrastructure maintenance on our properties, namely here at Tiffin, anywhere where we have buildings, trails, parking lots, etc. We have a 3-person crew, and yeah, they cover it all from custodial, snow removal, setting up for special events, board meetings, whatever the case may be. So they're very multifaceted. And then we get into the lands component, and they're responsible for ensuring environmental protection, because lands that we acquire that then eventually become public are sought after by the public. So we just want to ensure that people are walking in the right part of that property. So it's a busy program for sure, but we seem to get by. And COVID really emphasized the importance and the need of our lands, and those 3 individuals certainly felt that one for sure. They were on the run for 2 years. Our properties were just filled, our parking lots. In fact, we now have 2 new parking lots because of COVID, because the demand has just come on stream considerably. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This is a picture of Matheson Creek in Springwater Township running through a property we call the Ravines. Our entire inventory, our land inventory now is 5,200 hectares or 13,000 acres. The majority of it falls within menacing wetlands, but we do have little outliers, obviously, across the watershed. Menacing wetlands, Osprey wetlands, Niagara Escarpment, Oak Ridges Marine, they're just a few of the areas that we have our properties. The majority of our lands were acquired through donation. About less than 10% was actually purchased by the provincial government back in the 1960s, when recreation and flood control, as Chris had pointed out, were big ticket items back then. And so buying properties and putting in water control structures allowed for obvious recreation and flood control opportunities. The donations that we get from our private landowners or our development companies they're generally considered, I mean, obviously not for development. The development properties that we get are what we call the leftovers. A 25-acre parcel off of a 100-acre piece, a ravine, a wetland, or whatever the case may be, is not desired by anybody usually. And so we take it, we now have criteria, but in the past we've taken it and, it's protected for obvious reasons. Our lands are found in Simcoe, Dufferin, and Grey counties, almost all of our 18-member municipalities. And some of those properties, to help offset our costs, we have long-term leases and or rentals in place with municipalities and or agricultural individuals or private companies. I talked about criteria. Days gone by, there was a real push by our board members to try to get properties in all of our property or all of our municipalities across the watershed. And, we were somewhat successful, but it caused us issues when we were, getting offered 8 and 10 acre parcels of land. Those can be problematic. And so we have a land acquisition strategy that was approved by this board in 2020. And it all has obvious criteria that allows us to manage properties that we acquire cost effectively and efficiently. So now we wouldn't take any properties less than 50 acres or 20 hectares in size. And, they have to be bordering existing conservation areas, etc. So, we've obviously put some formality into our land acquisitions, but overall, all of our lands are, definitely sought after by the general public and academics as well. As I noted earlier, we get a lot of studies taking place on our lands every single year. And we have criteria for those studies as well, for them going in. So they are busy spots for sure. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Again, most of our land is available for public use. a small portion falls under natural area, which we use for monitoring or research, etc. You can see by the pictures here, we have the hiking, the bird watching, the nature appreciation, the canoeing. We see a lot of LARPer activity here at Tiffin. If you've never seen that before, it's certainly worth your while to come out and watch those folks in action. Great clientele, just a different use. We do what we can to pay our bills, obviously. We know our conservation areas are important to our member municipalities. Our visitors, they in some cases travel great distances to come and visit our properties. And as we know, travel leads trade. Every liter of gas, chocolate bar, cheeseburger that's bought in a municipality that's close to one of our properties, that's important to local economies. And we know that just by talking to merchants in our local economies or municipalities. We also know that of late, maybe 5-8 years now, we've had an issue with search and rescue operations that have had to take place, namely in Minising, but up Nottawasaga Bluffs as well. Some of our areas are considered wilderness, wild and great to get out to. And we get visitors that come in, they're unprepared. And that then leads to issues, which of course, then we have to have our paramedics and fire, et cetera, OPP attend those search and rescue operations. And we know that costs money and that causes grief. And we're taking away a service that, could be, better situated somewhere else at that particular time. Of late, we've been working with County of Simcoe. There is a paddling guide for the County of Simcoe that Springwater, Essex Township, Clearview Township, and ourselves worked with to come up with this beautiful guide to obviously facilitate all the visitors to our watershed to paddle those canoe routes, etc. We met about 3 months ago and requested the reprint, which is coming in shortly. It puts a stronger emphasis on be prepared, know what you're getting into. I mean, we have lots of signs out there, and we have lots of printed material that says be prepared and make sure you have this, that, etc. But we still have those individuals that jump in the water in their canoe, and 3 hours later they don't know where they are, how they're going to get back, and all of a sudden 11 o'clock becomes 10 o'clock at night, and there's a helicopter in the sky, and they're pulling them out. So we are very cognizant of that fact, and I know that I've been to almost all of the rescues in Minising over the years, and in talking to the fire chief or deputy fire chief, OPP, or the military, we've strongly encouraged to look at charging individuals for the cost for these rescues. It's not uncommon these days, especially down the States or other parts of Canada. And we are going to be putting those words in this paddling guide from the County of Simcoe that you could be charged for, for services needed to pull you out of this wetland at midnight in the middle of winter type thing. We hope that that's going to change attitudes, because right now, sometimes there just seems to be a little bit willy-nilly whenever it comes to visiting our more remote areas. So we are on top of that one, absolutely. Next slide, please. This is a shot of a wedding at Tiffin. Nothing says conservation like weddings. We now do in excess of 25 actually every year, and we're obviously trying to ramp that up. The weddings that we do here helps to pay staff to carry out other tasks on our properties, looking after our infrastructure, lands, etc. We become a very sought after area. We're kind of a small in the woods type of a venue, and people seem to be attracted to that. And so we continue to try and capitalize and make it happen. This was a request by a past chair for NVCA to host weddings to help offset our costs. And we've gone strong since that time, about 8-10 years ago, and we've got better over time now. We've got a real system in place with our vendors, etc. So it's we're doing the best we can to keep our costs down all around. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Another way to help offset costs of looking after our properties and spreading the good word of our properties is our Friends of groups. We currently have 3: Friends of Utopia, Fort Willow, and Minising Wetlands. And so we have these very active, very vibrant groups of people that come together monthly, and they come up with ideas for better public access and better education resources and restoration opportunities and special events. And they've been a godsend to us, quite honestly. It's been a real help when we didn't have, 15 years ago, we didn't have 3 people in our lands program. We had 1 person. And so the Friends of really goes a long way to assist us with everything that we do on our properties. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This is a slide of just a few. We could probably put 4 more slides up of the partners that we bring together to work on our lands. I mean, all of NVCA programs works in a partnership way with whomever we can, whoever can bring obvious benefit to the table for us and for them. And so we obviously work with all of our counties, our member municipalities, but we go far and wide to look at matches and like minds in terms of what we're doing and what we can do better to appease our visitors and generally just protecting the land as a whole. Next slide, please, Cheryl, which will bring us to our environmental stewardship and restoration. Basically, this program works to enhance and restore watershed environmental health through on-the-ground projects. Doug, Chris, and I made a presentation yesterday to Christian farmers, and my component was this very program. Very well received. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This program goes a long way. Working with our partners and our municipalities to better our water quality and quantity and everything that depends on it. Our stewardship program, it encompasses 2 main focuses: large-scale stream restoration using best practices in fisheries and aquatic biology. And we also have our rural and farm environmental best management projects, which is called our Healthy Waters program. Again, both projects aim to improve water quality throughout the watershed. And they can go from as small as a community tree plant to a large major waterway restoration project using heavy equipment and survey crews and kilometers of fencing. And if we can go to the next slide, Cheryl, we'll get talking about some of those large projects. Next slide. But this one here is Pine River, done several years ago. And basically it saw us stabilize. You can see the top bank there, heavy erosion. And we were stabilizing the eroding banks here using Christmas trees. As you can see down below, we have a partnership with Somerville Nurseries where we actually use Christmas trees that didn't make the cut, didn't get decorated. So we use them, weave them together, and they act as a kind of an anchor during the construction phase. These projects depend on a lot of leveraging of the levy that we get from our municipalities. And our leverage, or our leveraging, averages a 2-to-1, a 3-to-1, and sometimes a 4-to-1. So really good value for the dollar. And it's really kind of it's really kind of gone a long ways. I can remember starting here many years ago, and the person that looked after me or got me started had said, here's your green, you remember those green $1 bills, the paper ones? They handed me a $1 bill and they said, squeeze this and turn until it turns blue. And I've kind of kept that in the back of my head, and everybody here at the authority kind of keeps that same mindset that we need to generate other dollars, and we do a fantastic job with corporations, foundations, donations, landowners. We have absolute tremendous buy-in for our projects, and it's a joy to watch. Over the past 4 years, the stewardship program has delivered just about $1.5 million in grant dollars for projects within the watershed. So it's been a real win-win for everybody involved. Next slide, Cheryl. I talked about our Healthy Waters program. This is the other component of stewardship. This is essentially a grant program where we're out there visiting with our rural agricultural landowners. They're calling us. we have a list of projects that we offer grants anywhere from 10 to 30% up to a maximum of $10,000. And again, we use other partners' dollars that, if we have a big project, they come on board. And this before and after is basically a farm where we've got, access to the creek with cattle. We've got eroding banks. We've got degraded water quality. And we come in after working with the landowner. We fence it. We stabilize the banks. We'll do some plantings. And this grant program, again, is very, very popular. We'll do anywhere from 50 to 80 projects a year. Everything from well decommissioning, again, to alternative watering, fencing, tree planting. So very, very popular program. It's led by Shannon Stevens, who's well known in the agricultural community. I got a lot of nods yesterday when I presented her slideshow. A lot of people know her quite well. Next slide, please, Cheryl. We also take on removing online dams. Prior to the early 70s, an online dam, which is essentially a dam put on a online of a creek, cold water or whatever, and that's not permitted these days, but they're out there. And a pond on your property, etc., looks great. You sit around and have a fire and watch the dragonflies bop around. But it also is a contributor to algae and warming the water, etc. And so we've taken it upon ourselves to remove these dams with cooperation of the landowner and much to the delight of many, many agencies. These are big scale projects that work for everybody. And again, we have corporations, foundations, Cabela's, Bass Pro Shops, whomever, wanting to play a role in these projects because there's a real gain at the end. The fisheries, the recreational aspects, everybody gains on this. Over the years, we've done a number of these decommissionings in all four corners of our watershed, and that continues to this day. Next slide, please, Cheryl. We use volunteers to the maximum here at NVCA. We have to, and we never have a problem engaging them with hands-on restoration, tree planting, etc. Typically, we'll see 1,000 volunteers every year. Some years we'll see upwards of 3,000 volunteers. We see an awful lot of students. We see an awful lot of buses coming to tree plant sites, whether it be a public piece of land or a private piece of land. End of the day, our volunteers are satisfied with doing their part, especially now during these climate change concerns that we have, etc. So we take advantage of that. We look after them, and it's become a major part of our business. So kudos to our many volunteers. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Our forestry program, that's looked after by Rick Grillmeyer, long-term NVC staffer, basically works to increase forest cover for environmental and resource gains across our watershed. Next slide, Cheryl. I think Chris and I were taking slides from the same archive, but this one here is basically why we care about forests and planting trees. They provide an obvious link between water quality and quantity. We have a long history of tree planting that goes back to the 1920s. Prior to that, we had a long history of deforestation, creating wastelands and blow sand, etc. And such as you can see some of the stuff that went on here. So, over time, we live and learn, and we have been very active in the tree planting business since that time. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This green infrastructure benefits and practices, this little chart here, I found quite interesting. Benefits across the top and the practices from top to bottom. Basically shows you, with some of the benefits: improved water quality, reduced energy, improving air quality, etc. And then the practice being whether it's water harvesting or bioretention, green roofs, or tree planting. You can see that tree planting, it wins hands down. It's one of the best investments as far as benefiting community livability, etc. So it's clear tree planting is a very positive move, and we know that now with every tree that we've planted in our watershed for many years now. And that'll bring us into the next slide then, Cheryl. Since 1964, we have been planting trees, and the past 10 years have seen just over 1.5 million trees in the watershed. We are the only large-scale operation doing this within our watershed at this time. M&R used to play a major role. We used to get trees from M&R, but obviously that does not happen anymore. So we play a role here, obviously, for our watershed owners. Severn Sound has a smaller component up in that area, and they have a smaller tree availability program, and they use volunteers as well. So all in all, we try to work together to keep the green side up. And as they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Thank you, Cheryl. Next slide, please. We depend on partnerships with this program as well. And some figures here. In 2022, our levy was 18% of the entire forestry budget. So our budget for forestry, just over $450,000. We generated just over $350,000 in partnership fees to carry that program through. So essentially 82% of the forestry program is paid for by our partners. And they include obviously Forest Ontario, Simcoe County, Town of New Tecumseh, and any other little agency, etc. entity that is interested, we certainly take advantage of. And we're very pleased to continue to work with them. And we're planning, I think this year we'll be in excess of 100,000 trees again this year. Again, keeping those smiling faces across the watershed. Next slide, please, Cheryl. Our goal of planting trees and minimizing blow sand has changed in terms of tree planting and the program over the years. So now we're changing to we've got this emerald ash borer that's come into our watershed and widely established across the watershed. And 2024, it is believed that almost every ash tree will be consumed by this insect. Thousands of dominant ash forests will be lost, and they're now talking, and that'll be 40 plus years of planting. Those ash forests are gone, and so we're now replacing those forests with spruce and oaks and black walnuts, etc. So our kind of our approaches have changed a little bit with the introduction of this new invasive. Next slide, please, Cheryl. This is the last program within Conservation Services. This is environmental education, and a very, very popular program run out of Tiffin. Used to be exclusively facilitated at Tiffin, but now we've kind of changed that a little bit. And I'll get into that in a little bit. We typically would see upwards of 15,000 students a year coming to Tiffin. COVID obviously had an impact on that, and that knocked us down to, I think our worst year ever in my time here was just about 3,000 students in 2020, 6,000 students in 2021. And then next slide, please, Cheryl. Then last year, I think we ramped that up considerably. Next slide, please, Cheryl. We've had in place a program with the Simcoe County District School Board for many, many years, long established. And this is basically a program that facilitates the grade 4 and 7 curriculum. And we would see busloads of students coming out to Tiffin for a one-time school trip. And we would be doing the history part of the component and the environmental aspect of the component of the what's the word I'm listening here? I'll move on. So it's changed now with curriculum. It's changed now where the school board has asked that each student would have 3 site visits with our staff. Only one of them would be at Tiffin, and the other 2 would be on their properties, where we would be doing monitoring and working on, whether it be tree planting or doing bird boxes, whatever the case may be. And these outreach opportunities have really worked well, according to the school board. The students are seemingly grasping the environmental importance and the history importance much better. So their objectives are met. Our objectives are being met because school buses are becoming very expensive. So we go out with our little cost-effective vehicles and we meet them at the schools, and everybody seems to be to winning on this one as well. Next slide, please, Cheryl. So we don't just facilitate grade 4 and 7. We now are junior kindergarten right up to grade 12. Field trips that still come to the Tiffin Center cover geography, science, arts, etc. High school students, we now do what's called a specialist high school major and leadership training. And this essentially helps prepare these grade 12 students, etc., grade 11 students for the next step in their life towards their career. So they'll spend time sometimes with our stewardship folks, our monitoring folks, our lands people, just to give them an idea of what's out there in terms of job fields, etc. Moving down to the junior kindergarten and under, we now have our free play forest, our nature program for preschoolers. Again, has all become very, very popular. And this is the little one there, the little gal that's got the frying pan in her hand. That's working at our new mud kitchen. And we get little kids coming in here now. That kitchen was paid for by the retired school principals of Simcoe County. And that kitchen gets a lot of use 2 or 3 times a week by all these little kids that come in and they do their thing. So overall, our education program is a very, very successful program. As Cheryl pointed out earlier on, it consumes a very minor piece of the levy. We have to generate funds to carry this program at a cost neutral basis. Next slide, please, Cheryl. We see a lot of partnerships coming in this program as well. And the Rotary Club of Barrie have been a dynamic force with our education program and with our summer camp program. Summer camp, Camp Tiffin, I'm sure you've all heard it. We do entertain groups from other municipalities throughout the summer. Long waiting list. It's always filled up before spring comes type thing. We'll see 450 or more students every year. And of course, we're, as it says here, connecting with the earth, connecting with others, building friendships and memories. Very popular destination. We'll see students coming here to Camp Tiffin, and in 6-7 years time, they'll be ready to start their first summer job here at Tiffin, and then go on to university to become their environmental studies, or whatever the case may be. So we're making headway with some of our students. Is there a next slide, Cheryl? Governance of the board. Sorry, there is a next slide, and that's not me. Thank you.
Okay, so back to myself. So now that you've kind of learned all about the NVCA and what we do by departments, I'm going to kind of switch gears and speak to you about governance and the NVCA board and your role. So the Conservation Authority is ruled or governed by the Conservation Authorities Act, which right now is run through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. The Conservation Authorities Act lists a number of things that are required to be done, as you've heard throughout the presentation today. The NVCA, along with Conservation Ontario and other CAs, have created an administrative bylaw. Administrative bylaws are a template that Conservation Ontario created, and then of course each CA does some slight modifications based on the specifics to their CA. Our administrative bylaws I spoke about previously are on board. They're also found on our website, and I do encourage all board members to make sure that you have read them and make sure that you understand them. I'm going to speak to a few things right now that are in them, but also just of note is when we are silent on our administrative bylaws, we use the Robert's Rules of Order. So board members' roles and responsibilities, what is your role being here on the board? So the Conservation Authorities Act states that the board's focus is to approve and monitor all NVCA policies. And in addition to a number of other specified functions like approving, like I said, the policies and procedures of the NVCA, the budget, general levy, you give direction on priority of programs and projects, and generally responsible for other matters as required by the Conservation Authorities Act and any subsequent regulations. Included in the administrative bylaws is a board member job description. So it just lays out a little bit more detailed of what your role is. And again, I'm just going to kind of glaze over it. I encourage all of you to read it. But as a board member, one of your focuses is creating the strategic direction. So, formulating with staff and with stakeholders, the NVCA strategic plan, completing strategic visioning and long-term planning, setting implementation priorities in the approved business plan that would come to you, and then reviewing and approving all NVCA policies, and that includes employment policies. You will see throughout the year changes to our employee handbook. Policies come through for your approval. From a financial stewardship perspective, you are responsible for establishing budget guidelines, both for our operating and our capital, going through and approving our NVCA budget and our asset management plan, and monitoring the big picture budget process. You'll receive quarterly financial reports that will explain our budget progress and where we are at, and if we have any concerns that we need to bring forward to you. Through our policies, you're also responsible for controlling and safeguarding expenditures, and you're responsible for appointing the external auditor and reviewing annual financial statements. So for your information as well, we do appoint an auditor for a 5-year term. Our auditor, we did an RFQ in 2020, end of 2021 starting in the 2022 year, which is last year, and that's the audit that's starting next year. So they're in place for 5 years. We use KPMG, and then annually we just have to do an appointment of them at our annual general meeting, and then we'll do an RFQ again at the end of the next 5-year term. From a human resources perspective, it's the board's responsibility to select the chief administrative officer if the position becomes vacant during your term, and reviewing the CAO's performance. The chair of the board does do the performance reviews and then brings it to the board for your information. And then if you have any additional concerns or good things that you'd like to add to it as well. If there is a succession management plan for senior management, being a small organization, it's a little bit more of a struggle for some of the positions to have succession management plans. But if we do have one, it would be brought forward to the board. And then you're also responsible for receiving the policy and program for the NVCA's performance management system. We currently have one in place that was approved by the board after the last review, which I believe was about 6 years ago. I am hoping to review it in the next few years again, so you would see something come forward at that point. With regards to legislation, you're also needing to make sure that we're monitoring compliance with the federal and provincial legislation, including the Conservation Authorities Act. We are approving and approving and updating NVCA regulations and bylaws, and you're tracking and influencing, to the extent feasible, the federal and provincial legislations impacting the NVCA. Another part of the administrative bylaws is our code of conduct. I believe every municipality has one, and the NVCA also has one. So we encourage you to read that and understand our code of conduct. One of the things I wanted to bring forward, we had a what's called a personal responsibilities workshop from Fred Dean and Nigel Belchamber a couple of years ago. And they came in and they really focused on a few things that I think are important. So we wanted to bring forward here. When you get a general complaint, you're going to receive them. We are an organization that can be seen sometimes as the no people. And that's going to happen. When that happens, have them direct them to staff if you can. And by staff, I mean Doug. So you're going to email Doug and you're going, our CAO, and say, I've received this complaint or this inquiry. And then Doug will then push it out to the appropriate staff members for the information to get done. Don't get involved with staff work. You're not coming in to get into the weeds. You cannot be seen as directing staff. Your job is to oversee the organization as a whole. And also one of the things they stated is that emails should not be excessive in their influence. Your role is not to influence staff. Your role is to, again, oversee. Another big section that they spoke to that we think is important is voting. Your council cannot direct you to vote a specific way to a local board. They can tell you, but technically they're not allowed to. And you can vote differently at council or at board. So for example, your council may approve our budget, but you have a challenge with it and you may want to vote against it, or vice versa. You are allowed to do that. There's no rules stating that you have to follow your council's direction. Your role in the council and on a board is a personal responsibility. It's not, again, it's not your council's responsibility to oversee the NVCA. It's your responsibility to take the information back to your council. And then the best interest of a particular committee may be different from other councils, boards, or committees. So again, that can come back to the budget, that the best interest of the NVCA committee or board may be different than that maybe of your council, and that's okay. And you can vote differently in front of the board and in front of your council. That's okay as well. So next, I'm just going to touch on customer service. You'll see today as part of our staff report list, our customer service satisfaction survey. We completed a customer service strategy a few years ago, and we've implemented it. It follows some guidelines that, you know, we as staff are to follow to ensure that we're providing excellent customer service. And it also speaks to what we expect from our clients as well. You'll see we get a lot of fantastic comments, especially through Byron's programs. You've heard a lot of the people that we work with. They have great things to say about a lot of what we do. Now, it's not always that way. You know, you're going to hear a lot of complaints in regards to some of our planning and regulations sometimes. Excuse me. And again, you'll see most of that in the customer service thing, staff report coming forward shortly, but it is something that we take very seriously. And we wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we took it seriously by creating this strategy for us to follow. Well, next is the key issues facing our watershed, and that is Doug. And Doug has made it to the office. And so at this point, I'll ask Doug to show himself and unmute, and he can take over.
First of all, my apologies. I had Bell out working on the front of our yard this morning, and they managed to cut my internet cable. So it's the first time I've lost service in 6 years. So my apologies. The first slide, if you can move on to the next slide, please, Cheryl. The first slide is definitely speaking to climate change. I think a lot of the material that you've heard this morning is all drops into this same bucket. You can see the work that's a stewardship and the lands team do, the source protection, the river restoration, all these wonderful projects. They all meld together in a climate change piece. We created a 20-year integrated watershed management plan at the NVCA. And in the ensuing year, we produced a climate change strategy that really sized up well with the integrated watershed plan. That plan of climate change strategy came to fruition in 2022. But with all the changes that were occurring in the Conservation Authority's world, we delayed an update on that. We now have a little better idea of where things are going and how things are moving. So as you see in the staff reports today, we've done an upgrade and we've tried to integrate that with the integrated watershed management plan. You'll hear that word, integrated watershed management. One of the things that occurred in Bill 229, Schedule 6, the minister created the need for a resource management plan to be delivered and created by 2024. That will build off of our integrated watershed management plan. And most conservation authorities have done such an amazing job of integrating how they manage the watershed, and that involves staff as well. So you're all familiar with the FTEs that we track for staff involvement in different projects. It's very, very difficult to say, well, we'll just reduce one employee, or we'll just reduce one ecologist or one regulations person, and that will manage our budget. That'll have drastic impacts across the whole budget, because we have done such an amazing job of integrating that work into many different cross programs. So it's really challenging when you're looking at manipulating staff to reduce dollars. And the other message that's been delivered this morning, and it relates to the climate change piece as well, to that integration piece, is the ability for the NVCA to take those levy dollars that may cover the staff salary for a portion of the year where the program isn't generating revenues, but we're reaching out and we're integrating into society, and we're grabbing all of these willing participants that want to fund and tithe towards the project work that we do. And a lot of the project work that we do may be specific to a geographic region that may not be in your municipality. So you're scratching your head thinking, well, why are we financing these things if they don't affect our own municipality? Well, our watershed runs from Peel all the way to Georgian Bay. So there's tremendous effects and tremendous ramifications from decisions made. Anyone upstream making decisions can have tremendous impacts on the water quality and the resources of Georgian Bay and the communities that reach that direction. For example, if we lost the absorbent qualities of the Minising wetlands, for example, and we just couldn't hold that water there to really slow the tide, you're going to have tremendous impacts downstream, per se, in the Oxbow region, right at the bridge crossing in River Road and Wasaga Beach, where you could have upwards of 1.8 meters above the current river flooding into different areas. And you can see that downstream piece on how it works. The climate change strategy, we've been working quite a bit with Simcoe Muskoka Climate Change Exchange. We have a staff member that's participated with that group for the last 5 years. And now you'll see on many of our staff reports, we start to speak to climate change and what some of the effects of climate change are in our operational work as they appear at the bottom of our staff reports. Next slide, please. This is an interesting one. The pictures here you see on the left-hand side of your screen, tremendously invasive plant, the dog strangling vine. Raising havoc across native forests throughout Ontario. In the water, the little picture up the top there, the round-eyed goby is having tremendous impacts. The bottom feeder that just helps clean up and destroy a lot of the fish and fry and eggs that are in the bottom of the river. So it's having impacts on species variability across the watershed. And then we've all seen the zebra mussels. Anybody that's working around Lake Simcoe or Georgian Bay or Lake Huron and many of the Great Lakes, you can see the effects of the zebra mussels. But in addition to these, we have some other tremendous impactors in the area. Phragmites, can't drive really anywhere in our watershed and not find it at a ditch side in a water stray. We've been able to work effectively in the Collingwood Basin when funding is available to remove literally tons of Phragmites from the landscape. And when funding is available, we can work with other partners to do that, or work with Simcoe County per se to do that. Byron mentioned as well the emerald ash borer and how it's ravaging our forests and wetlands forests. Black ash is one of the few deciduous trees that can really grow in wetland features and has a tremendous ability to strengthen and protect the riparian areas of stream banks from erosion and from discharge from farm fields of phosphorus or nitrates that come out of the agricultural operations in unprotected riverbanks. One thing we've all been aware of recently, most recently, is the spongy moth. It's the moth that was really affecting our oak trees across the province. It's a cyclical pest that comes in usually 5 to 7 year cycles. But spongy moth and its effects on oak is going to be assisted by another little problem that's showing up in the state of Michigan. It's at our border on the Great Lakes right now, and it's called oak wilt, primarily targeting red oak species across the province. And then another one that's raised its head across the southern United States, and it's moving up into Michigan and Minnesota and Ohio and the Lake States, is the woolly adelgid, which will affect the hemlock population in our area. And hemlock's a strong component as a wetland species that's throughout our watershed. Next slide, please. I would be averse today if we didn't talk a little bit about development and a little bit about what's been happening at the legislature. Today, I just want to speak a little bit about Bill 23, a More Homes Built Faster Act in 2022. It was an omnibus bill. The tremendous carrot for everyone when you hear politicians talk is we've got to build more homes. We've got a growth goal of 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. And that bill itself received royal assent on November 28th. The legislation and regulations were formulated by December 28th, where they were approved, and several of them came into effect on January 1st of 2023. There's a lot of changes to following legislations as well. There's several acts that we work with that have been changed. The Conservation Authorities Act has some changes in it. There's developmental changes, our Charges Act of 1997, the Municipal Act of 2001, the Ontario Heritage Act of 2022, the Ontario Land Tribunals Act of 2021, and the Planning Act of 2022. All have ramifications for us. But primarily, the regulation changes really affect our plan review. Ontario Regulation 596-22, where the CA's focus on the review of natural hazards and drinking and source water protection. Those are our target initiatives. Those are the areas they want us to really look at working in. And in that, there's several acts that work as prescribed acts that work in companion with that evaluation. The Planning Act, the Aggregate Resource Acts, the Condominium Act, the Drainage Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Environmental Assessment Act, the Environmental Protection Act, the Niagara Escarpment Act, the Ontario Heritage Act, the Ontario Water Resource Act. Many of those things will change how we deal with those acts and how we report to our municipalities. So there's going to be things that happen over the course of the next year as they play out. We'll be learning how we have to work together. As a result of the legislative changes from Bill 229, Schedule 6, and Bill 23, we'll be working to develop an administrative MOU. We've been working on that for the last year and a half. It's become much more active in the fall of last year through this year. We'll be reaching out to staff and working with staff, creating material to present. In today's package, you'll also see a letter to council and a template for a memorandum of understanding that we'd like to be using with our dialogue with CAOs and senior staff. It's important to note that right now we have 12 or 13 MOUs in planning advisory or service level agreements in planning advisory with 12 to 13 of our 18 municipal members. We're going to keep that planning piece out of the administrative MOU. It's going to be driven on what are the things out of Bill 23 that we can do. We'll work with planning teams to identify those. We have been in communication with your CAOs and with your senior staff in planning, providing them opinion from Conservation Ontario, opinions from ourselves. We've updated those opinions as well and provided that information to your individual municipalities. And we'll continue to do that as we move forward. We're going to have to walk slowly here at first and see where we land and how this works. and just move along on that pace. So it's a lot of changes that have happened. It's a lot of information for you to take in, and we're all going to have to work together on this. And I think today you've had a really good shot of what it is the NVCA does in our watershed. CAs, for the most part, work collaboratively as best they can with our partners. We are here to be your partner. We don't want to be adversarial in any way, and we certainly try not to be. And we welcome any questions that you may have at this time. And I hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO Hebner and Directors Flanagan, Weston, and Heber for your presentation. And thank you to the members of the board for sticking with us as we try and show you this brief glimpse into the watershed and the services, the projects, the accomplishments of this small group of dedicated, enthusiastic employees. I think it's amazing what they can accomplish, having to, raise funds and do the project, do all the planning, etc. So thank you to our staff for their work. Are there any questions from our members of council, of the board? Sorry. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the CAO, I noticed that in the budget that NVCA pays taxes, realty taxes. I have a long history in land trusts, and because of the Conservation Lands Tax Incentive Program, land trusts can apply to be exempt for realty taxes on those lands that the program approves. What is the situation for NVCA and all conservation authorities when it comes to paying realty taxes on their properties? Thank you.
CEO Hebner.
Through the chair, I think we may have lost him again, but
yeah, come back in and my apologies. The only thing I heard for Christopher was the very last end of it. I'm going to turn this over to Chris and see if Chris could provide some comment on that for you, so we don't hold you up anymore. Thank you.
Sorry, it caught me a little off guard there. As far as I know, and this may actually be Byron's expertise, that we do pay taxes on our properties, but Byron could probably elaborate a lot more than I can.
Thank you, Chris. Through the chair, yes, we do take advantage of all programs relating to not paying taxes on our properties. Anything that is environmentally significant. It's a program through Ministry of Natural Resources. So we have capitalized on that one, absolutely. And we've also gone as far as we have properties in menacing wetlands. They were bought 50 acres here, 200 acres there, etc. So we have tried to amalgamate or bring those properties together to save even more dollars, largely OPP costs, etc. So yeah, if there's a program or a way for us to minimize our tax dollars, we certainly take advantage of it.
Thank you for that. That's if I may just follow up, that's another longer term issue, if you will. Certainly the land trusts in Ontario spend a lot of time lobbying the provincial government for the Conservation Lands Tax Incentive Program, and yes, we want to beef that up. So at any rate, a chat for another day, but thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Van Staveren.
Thank you. A question in regard to if we have groups within our community who wish to be doing, I won't call it investigative stuff, like working in streams, checking rehabilitation and stuff like that. There seems to be a few groups who are, I'll call them splinter groups. And I think it's important that they work in conjunction with the NVCA. Who should they be talking to? Who should we be directing them to?
Through the chair, if I may, to Councillor Van Staveren, please have them reach out to myself, and then we'll get the ball rolling.
Supplemental to that, when people start doing stream work, is that conservation authority or like say fish counts or something like that? Or is that even higher up as far as the federal levels and stuff like that?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Staveren's question, DFO plays a role in it. Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks play a role in it. We play a minor role. They would be the lead roles on that aspect. And Chris, if you have anything else to add to that, feel free to jump in.
I think our CEO through the chair has covered that. There may be other groups that are doing, maybe it's a study for a development, and they're looking to see what sort of fish habitat are in the stream that is adjacent to that. So there could be a variety of different groups that are doing work to ascertain what is the type of fish and what are the health of the fish in there. A lot of times it is, and it could be academia as well, universities as well. So there's a variety of different groups that may be doing studies. Typically, through our stewardship program, we've been made aware. And if somebody's doing stream restoration, it's either partnered through our stewardship folks or they've applied for us to a permit to do those works.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions regarding this presentation? If not, we have a proposed resolution. We have it moved by Councillor Peter Kaisbrink, and we are once again looking for a seconder. I believe we require for the motion. So is someone prepared to second the motion? And I will read it. Thank you, Councillor Mantlo. Resolved that the Board of Directors receive the orientation presentation as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? And again, using your onboard if possible, could you then submit your votes?
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Great, thank you. That was very fast. Okay, the next item on our agenda, once again, is as a presentation. Director Flanagan will be putting forward our proposed budget. We are not voting, we will not be voting on the budget today, but we do want to share what was proposed by the last board with you. So Director Flanagan, I will turn it over to you once again. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, good morning. I'm just going to get this slideshow started here. There we go. My apologies. I'm trying to do like 5 different things at once here. So as the chair mentioned, our draft budget was released last year. The board of directors, the previous board of directors at the August meeting approved a guideline of $150,000 increase to our general levy. We then take that guideline and we bring back a draft budget in September. Once that draft budget is approved for circulation by our board, then it's sent out to the municipalities for the mandatory 30-day consultation period. However, the NVCA typically gives a 60-day consultation period because we understand that we do have a number of smaller rural municipalities that may not meet, 3-4 times a month. They may only meet once or twice a month. So we try to give them enough time to be able to discuss it at their council meetings. And then typically our budget is approved at the December meeting. However, given that this was an election year, what we did is we still went ahead for the guideline because we needed to create a draft budget. Our municipalities like to know, by the end of August, basically most of our municipalities are asking us for our budget numbers. So we then created our draft budget, still presented it at the September meeting for them to approve for distribution to our municipalities. That then did occur. And since then, the CIO, Doug Hebner, and myself have been going out. We've presented to a few municipalities, Springwater and Innisfil, and we have Oro-Medonte next week. In a week and a half. We do go in front of some municipalities if they ask. So if you're council asks, we're certainly more than willing to go. And then you will actually approve the budget at the next meeting. So this meeting is just for me to be able to just give you a better understanding of it. So you're not just staring at documents, you're not just staring at my staff report, and I'm going to give you a little bit more insight into it. So to start, there were 3 documents that accompanied this presentation. And the first one is the 2023 program overview. This is a document that we actually started in, I believe it was in 2017, because the MECP was doing the review of the Conservation Authorities Act, and we created this for the MECP at the time. However, it was really well received by our member municipalities. So we decided to do it every year. And what it does is it really goes out and lets you know what are our accomplishments for the previous year, what are our goals for 2023, and then what are some of the challenges that we have. So we do encourage you to take a look at it. It really doesn't necessarily speak to the budget per se, but it does highlight each program into a little bit more detail, as you heard today through the orientation. So I've already spoken to the process. The draft budget is in attachment number 1 in the agenda package, and we'll speak to that shortly. So some of the pressures that the NVCA has, I always feel like I'm one of those mice on that little, or a hamster on those hamster wheels that just goes around and around and around, because every year I'm letting you know that the provincial transfer payment through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for the flood program hasn't changed. Although a few years ago, I got the wonderful news that I got to tell you it actually decreased by 50%. So there's been no inflation increase from the province. There has been no increase of any sort. And in fact, they decreased it 50% a few years ago. And flooding is one of our core things that we are to do, as you heard through the orientation program. The largest increase of uncontrollable costs for us actually is our insurance premiums. As most municipalities know, insurance premiums have skyrocketed in the last few years. And we've actually had to make some significant changes to the budget for the 2023 year due to these. The conservation, or NVCA, is part of the Conservation Ontario Insurance and Benefits Group. What that means is we all come together as a number of CAs, so we get better premiums for both benefits and insurance, because we're together as a bigger group versus a smaller group. I have looked in the past at alternatives, and unfortunately, we're getting the best rate because we are grouped into the larger group. And then similarly to municipalities, our maintenance material supplies costs, the inflation right now is crazy. Luckily, we're not in the food business and we're not buying a lot of food, because that continues to go really high. But still, things like wood that we use is still having high inflationary costs. So how do we address these pressures when we're creating our budget? One of the things we do is we look at 3-year trends. Unfortunately, the pandemic has kind of skewed some of those numbers for us. However, it still lets us see a bit of a pattern to allow us to make adjustments as needed. Of course, we look at all of our expenditures to see where savings can be found. One of the things that we're noticing is our office supplies. We're not using as much office supplies because we're not in the office as much as we were pre-COVID, because we have the hybrid work model. So some of those things we're going to start being able to decrease in our expenditures and save some funds there. We also look at increasing potential revenues whenever possible. And that includes things like applying for grants. As you heard through the orientation PowerPoint, we apply for a crazy amount of grants. Our staff have become professional grant writers. They're fantastic at it. And we look to see what more we can do to offset the increases to the general levy. As mentioned, the board approved guideline was $150,000 increase, and staff we're pleased to present a budget of just over $137,000 increase to the general levy, which does come in well below the board approved guidelines. We're really happy about that. So next, I'm going to speak to a few revenue highlights. When I'm doing revenue highlights, I like to preface it by saying I'm doing a $5,000 swing. So if something increased by more or decreased by more than $5,000, then that's what I'm going to speak to today. Some of our special benefiting projects, those are special benefiting projects related to specifically to a municipality. So a municipality has hired us to do a special project for them. Those increased by $14,000 for 2023. Other municipal contributions, so that's where we're doing a project and a municipality is supporting us. So we might be doing the project in, for example, Agila Toserantio, and Agila has agreed to contribute X number of dollars towards this project being completed. So that's also seeing an increase of $32,000. Other provincial sources, so that's other provincial sources other than the MNRF payment. So that's grants that we would apply for through the province of Ontario. That we're seeing a decrease of about $45,000. That's due to the completion of some grants, and there not being new grants for us to be able to qualify for. Federal sources, we decreased by $21,000. Again, similar thing. Where we're seeing the biggest increase, though, is in our contributions of $172,000. That is made up of a number of things. It's made up of things like donations, but it's also a big part of what we call private sector grants. So this is where our stewardship program goes out, grants through things like Cabela's or other partners that we have to be able to complete products. To complete our projects. User fees, planning, we're estimating an increase of about $137,000. A couple of years ago, it was noted that we were starting to see a very large increase in our number of regulations, applications, as well as planning applications. And we're seeing now that we're starting to process them, especially in our regulations department. Last year, you'll see when you see our annual statements in April, our regulations department surpassed astronomically the number that they had anticipated. So we've done some changing there to kind of better reflect the new norm of our permit fees that have come in. Education's also expecting an increase of $65,000. That's primarily because we're bouncing back from COVID. We had to reduce our revenue expenditures or our revenue expectations in education. And now we're seeing that bounce back. Camp Tiffin is back stronger than ever. Our school board programs are back stronger than ever. So we're anticipating a much better increase to our revenues. Tiffin operations, we are expecting an increase of about $57,000. That's a combination of a few things. One is our weddings. Second is parking revenue. Parking revenue has definitely increased since COVID. We've kind of already seen the top of the peak, and we're declining slightly, but we're still seeing an increase overall in our parking. GIS and technical support, there was a user fee of $12,000. That's actually a project that we're doing within Conservation Ontario. They've got some funding and they've hired us to do part of the project. And then our investment income, we have an increase of $25,000. So again, to give you a bit of some background, we used to have our reserves invested into actual investments. We're allowed to specific types of investments. And then kind of the market crash happened and we weren't gaining any money. We were actually losing money because of the management fees. So we took it out and put it into GICs, and then COVID hit and there was no interest rates basically. So we weren't earning very much money. So in the past couple of years, we'd had to decrease our investment income. However, we are starting to see the GIC percentages go up a bit. And based on the amount of money we have in there in our current GIC and what we're expecting come renewal time, we were able to increase our investment income by $25,000. Now for our expenditure highlights, again, I used a $5,000 swing. The first one I want to speak to is wages. Doug spoke to this kind of briefly. There is a significant increase. However, it's not levy impacted. So there was no levy used for the increase of these wages because this is for the addition of 4 new staff members or 4 FTEs, full-time employee equivalents, but they're grant-based. So they're paid for through the grants that have come in. And if we were to eliminate that position, we wouldn't be able to get the grant. So it's not, again, while there is an increase, we're seeing it offset by the additional grants and stuff that we're able to cover. Materials and supplies, general, we're seeing a small increase of just over $5,300. Again, that's due to inflation. Our cost of trees is decreasing slightly. And that's, I believe it's because we're not expected to plant quite as many trees this year. Transportation costs have decreased by $6,000, and that's primarily because of the hybrid working from home model. We're not using our fleet as often, and so we were able to decrease some of those costs. As previously mentioned, insurance has been a big hit, and we had to increase that by $37,000. And our interest and bank charges, we've done an increase. We are noticing, again, through COVID, that more and more people are paying by credit card or debit and less by checks. And there's a charge every time we do that, and that's a cost of doing business. So we've had to increase that slightly by $11,000. This is kind of small, and I appreciate that, but it is actually found on page 6 of the draft budget, so you can see it. But what it shows you is what 2022's CVA apportionment percentage was for your municipality, what it is for 2023, along with 2022's operating levy, 2023's draft operating levy, and then the difference. And so depending on your municipality, your percentage may have changed slightly, gone up slightly, gone down slightly, depending on the CVA apportionment. Now, we get these numbers from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. We have no control over them. The Conservation Authorities Act speaks to how we are to apportion our levy, and it is to be done through the apportionment percentages that they give us. So I just wanted to make sure that I showed you that. As being a new board, I wanted you to understand how each municipality is apportioned their percentage. Our asset management plan. So the NVCA has an asset management plan where we get asset levy to help assist with our assets. Excuse me. This is approved every year, generally in the August, September area for the next year. And what we do is we take a 10-year plan of what our assets would be and then divide it by 10, and that becomes your annual cost. Due to some cost savings, as well as not having used some of our equipment quite as much because of COVID, we were able to extend the life of some of our equipment. So we're really pleased to actually see that our asset levy request decreased this year. So every single municipality is seeing a decrease in the asset levy ask. And again, it's the same thing. It's showing your apportionment percentage compared to your 2022 and your 2023 capital levy ask. So what are we doing for capital? Well, for capital, we're doing a number of things that were deferred from 2022. So you'll see our capital requirements is about $270,000, but we're only asking for just under $140,000. And it's because a lot of it was actually already approved in our 2022 budget. Therefore, it was accounted for financially in the 2022 budget, but we didn't have to do that work in 2022. It's been deferred to 2023. Again, whether it's because of maintaining the life of the equipment or not needing to use the equipment as much. So some of it's already been accounted for. Some of the things that we will be doing this year is a dam safety review for the Utopia Dam, as well as some repairs of the new Lowell and Pretty River dams and dikes. Those are things that we have to do to stay in accordance with MNRF. We'll also be looking at some parts replacement on lands, flood, and monitoring equipment to see if we can extend the life. as well as the replacement of some end-of-life equipment. And then, as always, every year we do some computers and server upgrades and network hardware to make sure that we are a well-functioning organization digitally. When we do our budget, we are really cognizant of the impact to each watershed resident, and we strive to keep our numbers pretty reasonable. So you can see in this little chart here, this shows that per watershed resident, they're paying about $13.62 per year towards the Conservation Authority. That is up slightly from 2022, where it was $13.03. And then it shows you by each department, kind of what each department would make up that $13. Another way to look at it is by the CVA, the current value assessment. As you'll see there, the current value assessment in the NVCA's watershed is $56 billion, just about actually $56.5 billion. With our requested levy in 2023 it being just over 2.7 million, that brings the cost to $4.94 per $100,000 of current value assessment. So that means that each person or each home is paying $4.94 per $100,000 of their current value assessment. So if their home is assessed at $400,000, for example, it would be 4 times $4.94 would be what they would be contributing to the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. You'll see that it is a slight increase over last year. However, it is still below where we were even just 4 years ago. We're still striving to keep it as low as we can. We've spoken a lot about this through the orientation and kind of through this presentation already, but we really leverage your funds. We take the municipal investment of the proposed 2.7 million, and we get money from the province. We get grants, we get federal grants, users fees, and we garner that up to an additional almost $2.9 million for a total budget of just over 5.6 million, or actually almost $5.7 million. And that's really a strong place for us to be, especially in comparison to some other CAs. We have a less than 50% reliance on levy, which is a really good place for us to be financially. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I will just stop sharing so I can actually see people.
Thank you, Director Flanagan. We have a question for Councillor Baines and Councillor Belanger to follow up. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Flanagan, congratulations on this well presented and cogent budget, I would think. I just have one question on the status of the AMP. I would assume by what you're presenting that if everybody ponies up the requirement they're supposed to, there will be no shortfall in fiscal 23 for the AMP.
And through the chair to Councillor Baines, yes and no. What we've tried to do is every year we review the AMP and we say this is what the cost would be over 10 years and break it down to what the annual cost would be, and that's what we request. Every year we are using some of reserves, but because of the non-cash transfer to reserves at the end of the year because of amortization, it more than covers that difference. So yes, there's no physical impact to our budget. The AMP does cover it, even though it never shows it in the budget process.
Thank you very much. Would that our own municipality were under the same set of circumstances. We are not, but that's for next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Belanger.
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. Some of my questions were answered about the increase in payroll, and I just want to point out that this is not a concern. I'm just trying to learn more about the organization. So generally, when we're doing the municipal budget, we would indicate how much of the increase was related to just the increase of existing staff. You have indicated 4 new positions that are covered by grants, but would those grants be related to specific projects that are being undertaken that you were able to get the funding and be interested to know that? So I guess my 2 questions were is because it didn't indicate it as a percentage of your total payroll, I didn't have an idea of what your normal annual increase for all staff was, whether it was 1.5% or 2%, or and then again, if there's any specific projects related to the new positions that were grant covered.
Okay, so through the chair, and just look up the number. It looks like, it's hard to say because I keep it in both. We're doing a cost of living increase that's going to cost about $167,000 for the year. However, some of that is included for the new FTEs, so it's probably closer to about $160,000 for the current staff members. And then there is a small step for those who are eligible that it costs about $30,000. And then for your last question, it was related to specific grants. So we have, I'm just trying to remember the 4 positions off the top of my head. One of them, yes, so we have we had 1 IT position, and that came in through additional work that was created through the IT department. And then we have, no, that wasn't one of them. Oh yes, no, because we ended up not keeping Kelsey. Sorry, it was 3 new positions, my bad. It was supposed to be 4. At the last minute of the budget creation, it ended up being 3 because we made a change. The 3rd position was for our watershed science department. So we have watershed science department, which was paid for through source water protection, as well as some additional funding that was received there to assist them. And then there was our IT department that did that one. And who was the 3rd position? Was it you? Our administrative assistant. That's right. We added an administrative assistant. Carrie just reminded me, she's right beside me. We used to have Haley who did that role, and Haley actually moved into a combined role where we combined 2 roles into 1. So we had to, in doing so, we created a new position for Carrie.
Okay, through the chair, thank you. That answers my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Little. Actually, it's a bit of a follow-up to the previous question. It sounds like not all of the salaries were grant related, but just curious, moving forward, obviously this will cover the salary piece for 2023, but what does the future look like? Because obviously typically grants are a 1-year, one-off type of thing. So is this something that we would anticipate could have an impact in the future when it comes to the levy?
So through the chair, that's a great question. You're right that the administrative assistant position was not created through grants. What that was done was through the creation of the 2-in-1 position, as well as a savings that was found within the departments through expenditures, being able to work from home. So that's how the administrative position was created, and that won't impact anything going forward because it was a savings that we did through some shuffles of other staff. The other 2, source water, we don't anticipate source water funding going anywhere anytime soon. And our IT department, that position, if it were to lose any of that funding going forward, it would be, I've already spoken to this manager, it would either be they'd find new additional funding, the position would no longer exist, or the departments as in the organization would have to decide if they'd step up and pay the overhead costs from their revenues. But at that point, we're talking about $12,000. That would be of a challenge for that position. So we're not talking large dollars.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the clarity. And again, kudos to all involved, because again, a very another lean budget and actually the lowest increase out of our service partners that we're seeing at the City of Barrie. So kudos to everybody involved.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Mangelo?
Thank you. Through the chair, just to follow up on the previous questions. You mentioned that the cost of living index is what you're using, or it's a cost of living increase. What is the actual salary increase per each established employee?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What the NVCA did, oh boy, shortly after actually it was before I got here, I modernized it a bit when I got here about 10 years ago. We take the cost of living index, or the CPI, I should say, for each month, and then we average it out, and we use the Ontario one. So what we do is we go from June of one year to May of the next year. So in creation of the 2023 budget, we would have used May 2021 to June 2022, and that created the average of that. So it's always a set amount. It's not some random number that we pick out. It's always an average number. And that was it's board approved, by the way, just so you understand. We didn't just decide on doing that. That was a board approved policy on how to do it. And it just makes it so that we're never having to randomly decide what cost of living should be. It's also not reflective of if there's 1 month that we happen to grab the 1 month that's really high. It's an average over the 12 months. We do understand it is a little bit higher this year because cost of living has increased significantly, and it is cost of living, the average was 5.3% over the 12 months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions regarding the budget or the presentation?
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to speak to all board members and just comment on one issue. When you're looking at our budget, and you're looking at our budget with respective to your budgets, look at the percentage that we're involved in and make that calculation. Very small amount of your overall budget delivery costs come from the CA. But the line that I want to point out is the money that we do receive, we're matching or surpassing, going out and getting that money. I really challenge you to look at all of the other people that come with hands held high to come and get funding from a municipal council that can deliver the return of investment on your investment. We do it year in and year out. It doesn't lie. It's $2.8 million of generated revenues that we create as an organization. Your money allows us that seed money to pay staff over a course of a whole year. And that's vitally important that I think that you understand that, because that's where CAs are different. And the other major difference that CAs have over a municipal budget is the municipal budget starts with growth. Your tax base allows you to grow your budget annually. We have zero growth on our budgeted dollars. It doesn't come to the fiscal end of the year and we calculate there will be a certain amount of investment coming from other features. Our costs aren't that liquid. Our costs are what we display to you, and they don't increase before we start. So if you're looking at a percent budget, say, oh, well, we're really challenged. We want to hold you to a 2% budget because we're only increasing by 2%. Our 2% is vastly different than a municipal budget's 2%. And I think those are just comments that I think it's important. This is a new process for you. It's the first time many of you have seen our budget in this explanation. We have presented to several of the councils that you participate with. Again, we're happy to come and speak to councils about budgets. And I hope this information's been good learning for you this morning. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to myself or Cheryl, and we'd be happy to have any types of discussion on the budget with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions or just matters to be discussed about the budget, we do have a proposed resolution moved by Councillor Manklow and seconded by Councillor Fagan that the Board of Directors receive the presentation on the draft 2023 budget as presented. Any further discussion? If not, please vote on board. Thank you.
Through the chair, that motion has carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have no deputations today and no hearings. So the next items on our agenda, we deal with in a consent basis. And so we have had a request to pull 2 items so far. Item 12.2.1 dealing with climate change and item 12.2.5 dealing with our permits and regulations. Are there any other items in our agenda that anyone else would like to have pulled for further discussion? If not, we will have a
Excuse me, through the chair, if I may, Councillor Manklow is raising.
sorry, Councillor Manklow.
I have a non-agenda item. I'm suggesting we might have a 5-minute stretch and break.
Sure. If everyone's okay with that, I think that's probably a good idea. Okay. So we'll reconvene in approximately 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
And just a note, if you stay online or when you come back, just note that we still are live streaming. It's a challenge for us to switch it off and back on. So just be cognizant of what you're saying. And we do recommend that you shut your video off during this time.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Welcome back.
I
Been a long morning.
had to put some more renewable biomass on the heater, so
Oh, my apologies. They're typically not this long. This is only long because I really wanted to make sure you as a new board understood what we do.
no, it's greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time and the presentation.
So Chair, whenever you would like, it's hard to tell who's back and who's not because of the no camera thing, but.
Yes, I was just going to request that when you return, if you could just please turn your camera on, even if it's briefly, so we know that you have rejoined us. And as soon as we have a quorum, we will move forward with our next resolution.
Through the chair, when we start back up, if I could have one last comment addressing some news about the budget, if that would be possible.
Before the next resolution, yeah. Certainly.
Thank you.
My apologies for being late to the meeting. I was out helping my neighbor get his tractor going, and I thought we were starting at 12. I don't know why I missed it.
Well, we hope to be finished by 12, but we'll see.
All right, so let's start time.
Thank you for.
Yeah, let's start time was 11, not 12. Then my apologies.
9.
Oh, 9. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh boy, I don't know how I missed that altogether in my emails. I must have not noticed it. My apologies.
Not all right, Michelle. We're actually recording it, so if you want to see what you missed, you'll be able to.
All right.
Because I was so busy doing so many presentations today, I wasn't able to capture what time you actually joined the meeting. Are you able to tell me that so we can put it in the minutes?
Yes, I joined about 11:15.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have enough for quorum yet?
Through the chair, I believe so. The one thing I will note though for you is that Mayor Darren White is listed as a mover or a seconder? Seconder?
A seconder, yes.
That list, so we'll need a new seconder for that.
And that would be Councillor Belanger. Thank you very much. So, first of all, before we go to the resolution, I will go to CAO Hefner, who wished to make a comment on the budget.
I just wanted to bring you up to date. We have had our budget out with municipal partners for a number of months now, and we have heard back from both Innisfil and Collingwood have unanimously passed our budgets in their council meetings. Innisfil at their last meeting and Collingwood last evening, we were both informed by their CAOs. So that's some good news for our budget.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the next item, so I have it that's moved by Councillor Isis and seconded by Councillor Belanger. And it's resolved that agenda item numbers 12.2.1 and 12.2.5 were identified as requiring separate discussion, be referred for discussion under item number 10, and further that all consent list agenda items not referred for separate discussion be adopted as submitted to the board, and staff be authorized to take all necessary further actions required to give effect to the same, and further that any items in the consent list not referred for separate discussion and for which conflict has been declared are deemed not to have been voted on or discussed by the individual making the declaration. So far, we have had no declarations of conflict, so I think that all members then can vote on this item. So if you could please go to your on board. First, I should ask if there is any further discussion on this. If not, we will go to on board to submit our votes. Thank you.
Through the chair, that motion has carried.
Great. So the next item then we'll deal with is item 12.2.1. And I believe we have Sarah Thompson here who's going to give us a brief sorry, I just hit the wrong button. Are we just allowing Sarah to give a report, or are we looking for a question to be answered?
Through the chair, it's Chris here. If I can, I could speak briefly to the report, and Sarah certainly can provide the details, but I think we're really focused on questions. But
Okay.
we have updated through the chair. We have updated, provided a climate action plan. Originally, we did it back in 2016, and just give you some background on that. Did considerable amount of stakeholder engagement with that, including partnering with Georgian College, who helped us with that stakeholder engagement and formed the action plan. Then we felt it was necessary to look at that plan and update it, and that was an internal process. And so what we're doing now is reporting back on, the climate action plan came to the board, was approved. Now we're sort of reporting back on some of the work that's been done under that. And moving forward, we anticipate that we're probably reporting to the board on a yearly basis. So both Sarah and I are happy to answer any questions that the board may have on this matter.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Boulanger, you had a question perhaps?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Not so much about the climate action plan, but and it came up earlier in the meeting about how the NVCA, I guess, and the relationships with whether it be resident groups or whether it be formal committees of council. And I'll just explain why. So I am not a member of the Wasaga Beach Climate Action Team, but I have attended and been a resource in all of their meetings for a year and a half. They did reach out to the NVCA and had a very good meeting, and they were very pleased with the amount of attention and participation in providing information to them, but it hasn't been an ongoing relationship. One of the reasons I'm on the board here is that the municipality of Wasaga Beach is going to form a climate change advisory committee to council, which I will be the council rep. And again, certainly I can be a conduit, but we have all these groups. I know you mentioned the exchange, and some of these groups do participate on the exchange, as do some municipalities. But I think there's an opportunity for some kind of formal ongoing information sharing, because education it's great with the schools, but believe me, we have a lot of residents that need education, and we have a lot of your projects need volunteers. And I think to potentially formalize even the information that came out of this meeting and will be posted on your website, but that if there could be, highlights that are sent to some of these groups that they can share in their meetings, how they can help with projects, what is the important information to share with the residents that they come in contact with. Because I can just speak for Wasaga Beach, but I think they're up to almost 400 members. So they're every month they're increasing their reach of how they can communicate to our residency and reinforce a lot of the work you do, the volunteers you need, the information you'd like conveyed broader, those types of things. So that was just sort of a question and a comment.
Thank you very much. Chris Hebert or Sarah Thompson, did you wish to add any further comments? Or
actually, through the chair, I see our CEO waving at us, so I think he wanted to wade into this.
Through the chair, if I may, for Councillor Boulanger, thanks so much, Joe, for your participation in that group and bringing that message forward. We did have a wonderful meeting with your group. I also attended Collingwood's group when it started at their invitation, and we listened and participated in that role. At the end of each board meeting, we send out information encapsulating what the board meeting is. That's one way that we may be able to reach out to them that way. And at that time, we could also remind them to, frequently pop into our website. There's always information on our website. And we are only a phone call away. You saw a very lean budget presented. Our staff is very, very busy. We're committed to a lot of project work and a lot of work. So each time we pull them in a different direction, it diffuses our ability to do the work that we're tasked to do by the province. Not saying that we don't want to do that work. We welcome the opportunities, but that might be a way to reach out is to, if you have people that you think, hey, this messaging would be really beneficial for, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Belanger?
Yes, just for follow up through the chair, and thank you very much for your comments. I think there's probably individuals on some of these groups that would take that on, and I don't know if we're aware of all of these splinter groups that may have been in contact with you, but I think I certainly have come in contact with people that if they can insist in that endeavor and that they can take information from you that you feel is appropriate and that they would create that network of communication on your behalf, something to consider.
Thank you. And any further comments on this issue? If not, we do have a proposed resolution which we will pass or consider before moving on to the next pulled item, but I am looking for a mover and a seconder for that resolution. So Councillor Belanger, Councillor Harvey.
Sorry, through the chair. There's actually already a mover and a seconder.
Sorry, I'm looking at my wrong. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize. But thank you for those who volunteered. So we have it moved by Mayor Jennifer Coughlin and seconded by Councillor Nicole Fox. So thank you for doing that. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors receive staff report number 010223 BOD regarding the 2022-2025 NVCA Climate Change Action Plan, summary of progress in 2022 and 2023 goals for information. Is there any further discussion on the recommendation? If not, I will call for the vote. Thank you.
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Okay. Thank you very much. So the next item that was pulled is item 12.2.5. And once again, is there a specific question or is there a comment from staff on this item?
Thank you through the chair. Other than say, I think we're pleased with the numbers. We welcome any discussions. This certainly is one of our more polarizing programs, and I know there'll be questions, and we're happy to answer those the best that we can.
Okay, I think Councillor Belanger, did you have a question or comment?
Well, yes, I had pulled this item. So, and I had, in the first meeting, I had talked to Marion McLeod prior to seeing the data here, but she was asking about, my involvement on the board and that type of thing. But one of the things that we hear sometimes from our planning departments, and it may be convenient for them, and sometimes from residents, is that, that the NVCA tends to take a long time on their decisions re permits. And I was very pleased to see that 60 out of 62 times in the last 6 months that the NVCA met their time requirement. But Bill 23 also puts at risk all of our application fees if we don't hit timelines. So although we were hitting the timeline set out for the NVCA, I didn't know when we overlay that to the municipal requirement, how close to the edge we are at meeting the overall timeline for permits. So I had a conversation with our director of planning, and he didn't really give me a good answer, but he suggested that I just suggest that that the NVCA work with the municipality to ensure that that the timelines in the overall processing of a permit, making that decision does meet the legislative requirement, so that we're not putting all of our application fees at risk. So that doesn't have to be answered today. I will also delve in it a little further, and but certainly, as you know, there's a great deal of concern related to lost development charges and lost application fees as it relates to the revenue that our municipalities need. Thank you.
Director Hebert, did you wish to respond to that?
Just briefly, and just great comments and great question. So we do want to separate a little bit the permitting process from the planning process. And so Bill 109 is putting tremendous pressure on our municipalities in terms of timelines, in terms of fees. We've been meeting with many of our municipalities on their process and how they're going to address Bill 109 in terms of, and a lot of it's going to be a lot more pre-consultation before the process starts. So we want to be able to make sure that our municipal partners are successful in meeting their timelines and expectations. So that's certainly on front of our mind. We will be meeting with Wasaga Beach staff, I think it's next week, not only about Bill 23, but we also suggested we talk about Bill 109 as well in terms of the pressures they have. So we're happy to talk to our municipal partners on that, and because we understand what that means for them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mankler?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, kind of a follow-up on the previous question. Our timelines that we've been using, and we're doing very well, and I compliment you on it. Do they fit with the new ministry timelines? Are they more stringent or less stringent?
So if I may, through the chair, the timelines we're using is what's out of what's called the Calc report, is a 2010 report. There is potential changes to the Conservation Authority Act that haven't come into place that may change those timelines and put increased pressure to make sure that we were dealing within those timelines, or the application could be going to the Ontario Lands Tribunal. So those things are under change or under flux. So when those new things come into play, and we will be letting the board know what those new changes are and how we're complying with it. But our intent is to comply with whatever the Act's changes are, and also be responsive to our municipal partners and their changes too.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baines, did you have a question or a comment? I just wanted to check before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. No, that was an error. Still learning the ropes.
No worries. We're all learning. Okay. Are there any? Oh, CAO Hebner, did you wish to comment? Yes.
Through the chair, if I may. 3 years ago, the Conservation Ontario tasked fast-growing municipals, like areas that were watersheds that had fast-growing municipal partners. We were identified as one of those of high growth. The New Tech Basin just exploding for us. It's coming in Brampton North. The on-streaming of the Midhurst development happening, and all of the development that's happening across our watershed. So that CALC number, a select number of CAs started to participate and do reporting on a 60-day cycle. So we've provided you with information on 90 days and 60 days. So that if that's helpful, I think that's important to see and differentiate the two. It does drop down a little bit from the 96.5 to a little lower number, but we are taking steps, and legislation's probably going to come out about further reporting by by CAs to the government on timelines and how we do things. And a lot of that template has been developed following the guidelines that Conservation Ontario provided for CAs. So we're kind of in sync with that somewhat. But as Chris did mention, we're certainly going to work with partners on pre-consultation and try to get ahead of the game with really fulsome applications. That's the biggest slowdown to the process, is an incomplete application. And I think our municipal partners are going to take that, and they've really heard that message from us and from others that they deal with. So maybe we can hold people to task on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments on this item? If not, we have a resolution by Councillor Mantlo and seconded by Councillor Harvey. Resolved that the NVCA Board of Directors receive staff report number 050223 BOD that summarizes the permits and approvals issued by staff for the period of June 13th, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Any discussion on that motion? If not, I would ask for you to cast your vote. Thank you.
Through the chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So that brings us to item 13, other business. Is there any other business anybody wishes to bring forward today? Director Flanagan?
Sorry, through the chair, I forgot to mention in one of my earlier presentations, if you would like to pull a staff report in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out to Carrie or myself prior to the meeting. Administratively, it is much easier for us to be able to pull an item prior to the meeting. That doesn't mean that we're saying you can't pull an item at the meeting. You can still certainly do that. It's just if you know in advance that you want to pull something, if you can let us know, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, I have another piece of information about the chair of the board. The Minister of Natural Resources at the 4th Ontario Conference announced an additional $2.7 million for tree plant funding towards the 50 million tree program. So that's really, really good. That will augment the $7.5 million that Forests Ontario has to try to increase tree planting by 30 million trees by 2030. So this is really good news for the province of Ontario.
It is. And I hope we get a chunk of that. Thank you. That's excellent. So if there's no further business, I wish to thank everyone for their participation today, for hanging in during a long information session. And we, you know, as Cheryl has said, not all our meetings will be this long. So thank you for staying. And that does bring us to the last item, which is the motion to adjourn. And I just need to find it here. Sorry. Moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Fagan, that the resolved that the meeting adjourn at 11:58 to meet again on March the 24th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. So if you could cast your vote, please.
Through the chair, that motion has carried.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you next month.